What if the AI model running on your phone right now, the one answering your questions for free, was actually built in Hangzhou, not California? In January 2025, a small Chinese lab nobody outside the industry had heard of released a model that matched America's best reasoning AI, and did it for a training bill that looked more like a rounding error than a moonshot. Within days, $1 trillion vanished from US tech stocks. That was the moment, not a warning shot, the first real hit, and it wasn't a one-time fluke, it was the opening move in a much bigger campaign. Because while Washington was busy congratulating itself on cutting China off from the world's best chips, China was quietly building something the export controls never anticipated. An entire parallel AI industry, models, robots, chips, data centers, and the power grid to run them all. That doesn't need Silicon Valley's permission to exist. For a decade, the American strategy rested on one bet: control the most advanced chip on Earth, and you control who gets to build advanced AI at all. That bet assumed China would try to beat America at the same game. Buy the same chips, build the same closed models, compete on the same terms. Instead, China changed the game entirely. It gave its models away for free. It built its own chips instead of smuggling America's. It built the power plants before it needed them, instead of scrambling for electricity after the fact. And where the old export control rules had a gap, Chinese companies found it and used it legally for over a year before anyone in Washington noticed. Here are the 5 industries behind China's AI takeover, counting down to the one that has Washington rewriting its laws in real time. Number 5. China gives away the software the world actually uses. Start with thought of this story that costs nothing to download. Alibaba's Qwen family of AI models passed 1 billion cumulative downloads on Hugging Face, the world's largest AI model platform, by early 2026, reaching that milestone faster than any open-source model family in history. In a single month, February 2026, Qwen alone generated over 153 million downloads, more than the next 8 competitors combined, including Meta, DeepSeek, OpenAI, Mistral, and Nvidia. Zoom out further, and the picture gets stranger. According to Hugging Face's own Spring 2026 report, Chinese open-source models now account for roughly 41% of all downloads on the platform, overtaking American models for the first time ever. MIT Technology. Review's analysis put Chinese open-weight models at just over 17% of global downloads for the year, ending August 2025, edging past the US for the first time on record. By mid-2026, Chinese trending rankings held 5 of the top 10 spots on Hugging Face in a single month. This didn't start with DeepSeek's viral moment in January 2025. Alibaba had already crossed 600 million cumulative Qwen downloads by September 2024, quietly laying groundwork while most of the Western AI industry was focused entirely on closed, paid models like GPT and Claude. Now there are more than 180,000 derivative models built on top of Qwen alone, more than Google and Meta's open releases combined. And researchers at Stanford and Berkeley have reportedly trained competitive models on top of Qwen for as little as $30 to $50. And Qwen isn't alone at the top. Moonshot AI's Kimi K 2.5 has reportedly come close to matching top proprietary systems like Anthropic's Claude Opus on early benchmarks, according to MIT Technology Review. While DeepSeek's V4 family made headlines of its own in April 2026, by pricing its flagship model at roughly 97% below OpenAI's comparable offering. Cheap enough that developers were reportedly paying as little as $0.0036 per million input tokens, compared to 50 cents for the American equivalent. Within weeks, DeepSeek cut prices again, this time by another 75%, calling the reduction permanent. Analysts described it as the opening shot in a price war nobody outside China had budgeted for. Here's why this matters more than a leaderboard. The U.S.-China Economic and Security Review Commission, a body that advises Congress, published an analysis in March 2026, describing what it called 2 loops. One loop of Chinese open-source innovation, and a second loop of deployment across manufacturing, logistics, and robotics. Export controls can stop Nvidia's best chip from reaching Beijing. They cannot stop a free model from being downloaded in Nairobi, Jakarta, or São Paulo. At the 2026 World AI Conference in Shanghai, Xi Jinping told delegates to seize what he called a rare historic opportunity in open-source AI and launched a 29-nation AI cooperation initiative the same week. Washington has spent 3 years treating this race as a chip fight. China just won a different fight entirely, for free in plain sight. But giving away the software is only step one. What happens when that same free model stops living inside a chatbot and gets loaded into something that can actually stand up, walk into a warehouse, and do a job? Because China isn't just winning that race too. It's not even close, and the gap is bigger than almost anyone realizes. Stick around, because number 4 is where this stops being about your phone and starts being about your job. Number 4, China builds the robots that actually use the AI. An AI model is just software until it can pick something up. That's where the next industry comes in, and China isn't just leading it, it's lapping the field. Chinese companies now account for more than 80% of all humanoid robot installations worldwide, according to Counterpoint research. Of the roughly 16,000 humanoid robots installed globally in 2025, Shanghai-based Agibot alone captured about 30% of the market, followed closely by Hangzhou's Unitary Robotics. TrendForce projects China's humanoid robot output will grow as much as 94% in 2026, with Unitary and Agibot together shipping nearly 80% of everything sold worldwide. Analysts expect the global market to roughly sextuple by 2027, crossing 100,000 units, with automotive, logistics, and manufacturing driving most of the demand. The scale gets more concrete once you look at specific factories. BYD, China's electric vehicle giant, is expected to scale its humanoid robot fleet from about 1,500 units in 2025 to roughly 20,000 in 2026, folding them directly into its EV assembly lines. Ubtech's Walker S robots already perform quality inspection work inside automotive factories. China's Ministry of Industry and Information Technology has set a national target of 100,000 deployed humanoids by 2027, backed by a formal humanoid robot action plan. Analysts at Rest of World describe this as Beijing running its electric vehicle playbook a second time. Pair heavy state support with a dense, vertically integrated supply chain. Let domestic companies compete brutally against each other at home, and let the survivors flood the export market once costs collapse. It worked with solar panels, it worked with EV batteries. Now the same components, batteries, actuators, sensors, and increasingly the AI models steering the robot's brain, are being assembled inside the same industrial clusters in the Yangtze River Delta that already build the world's electronics. The financial numbers back up the scale. Industry research presented at last year's World Artificial Intelligence Conference projected China's humanoid robot market would nearly double in value year over year, before growing into a market worth tens of billions of dollars within the decade. Beijing's own ministry guidance calls humanoid robots the next transformative technology after computers, smartphones, and electric vehicles, language that reads less like a forecast and more like a plan already being executed. Meanwhile, in the United States, commercial deployment is real but far smaller in scale. Boston Dynamics Atlas and 1X's Home robot have both begun limited commercial rollouts, and Agility Robotics Digit is working warehouse floors for companies like Amazon and GXO Logistics. Tesla's Optimus is expected to reach mass production at some point in 2026, but none of these programs are shipping at anywhere close to the volume Chinese manufacturers are already hitting. And analysts at TrendForce have specifically flagged Tesla's production timeline as the one wildcard that could reshape the entire global supply chain if it slips or accelerates. An AI model tells a robot what to do. A Chinese-built robot is now the thing most likely to actually do it, on a factory floor almost anywhere in the world. But none of this, the models, the robots, any of it, runs without one thing the internet can't give it for free: electricity, enormous, almost unbelievable amounts of it. And here's the part that should genuinely worry Washington. America might be running short on the one resource this whole race actually depends on, while China has been quietly stockpiling it for a decade. Number 3 is the item nobody outside the industry is talking about, and it might be the most important one on this entire list. Number 3. China has the one thing US AI companies are running out of: power. Here's the part almost nobody talks about outside the industry itself. Training and running AI doesn't just take chips. It takes an almost unbelievable amount of electricity, and the United States is starting to run short. China's data center capacity is projected to nearly double, reaching roughly 60 gigawatts by 2030, according to analysis from Rystad Energy, pushing data centers to consume close to 289 terawatt-hours of power a year, about 2.3% of the country's entire electricity demand. Installed capacity alone is set to climb from 32 gigawatts at the end of 2025 to about 40 gigawatts by the end of 2026. Meanwhile, China is projected to be sitting on roughly 400 gigawatts of spare power capacity by 2030, close to triple the power the entire global data center industry is expected to need at that point, according to analysis published by IEEE ComSoc. Compare that to the US situation. Morgan Stanley has forecast American data centers could face a 44 gigawatt electricity shortfall. New York recently became the first US state to suspend approvals for new large-scale AI data centers over grid capacity concerns. Analysts note Chinese data center operators can often pay less than half the electricity rate American operators pay and can move a project from planning to full operation in months rather than years, thanks to faster permitting and a power grid built years ahead of demand, rather than scrambling to catch up. China isn't leaving this to chance, either. In mid-2026, Beijing's National Development and Reform Commission drafted a national AI computing plan reportedly worth roughly $295 billion in public funding, aimed at building out AI infrastructure running on roughly 80% domestic chips, explicitly squeezing out Nvidia and AMD hardware in state-funded projects. Reports indicate state-backed data centers were already required to source at least half their chips domestically as of August 2025, with fully foreign-free requirements following by November. China is also increasingly powering this build-out with renewables rather than straining its coal plants further. Government targets call for renewable energy to supply roughly 4/5 of the data center sector's power by 2030, up from just 11% in 2023, according to comments from a director at State Power Investment Corporation reported by Yahoo Finance. Beijing's Eastern Data, Western Computing initiative is physically relocating energy-hungry data centers to resource-rich Western regions like Inner Mongolia, where wind and solar power is abundant and cheap, rather than trying to squeeze more capacity out of an already strained Eastern grid. The opposite problem American operators are currently facing on the east and west coasts. Silicon Valley can design the smartest model on Earth. If there isn't enough electricity to run it, that intelligence sits idle. China built the power grid first and is now building the AI on top of it, the exact inverse of the American approach. So China has the software, the robots, and now the power to run all of it at scale. There's just one thing left it was supposed to be completely locked out of: the chip itself. Washington bet its entire strategy on that one point of control. What actually happened next is the part of this story Nvidia's own CEO has now admitted out loud, on the record. And it is not going the way anyone in Washington expected. Don't stop now, because number 2 changes the entire equation. Number 2, the chip ban didn't stop China. It built China a chip industry. For years, the assumption in Washington was simple: cut China off from Nvidia's most advanced chips and its AI ambitions stall. That assumption is now visibly falling apart. According to Bernstein estimates reported by The Economist and relayed by the South China Morning Post, Huawei is projected to hold roughly 50% of China's domestic AI chip market by 2026, worth about $12.1 billion in sales, up from a market that barely existed as a serious Nvidia rival 2 years earlier. Nvidia's share of that same market, by contrast, has reportedly collapsed from around 39% in 2025 to roughly 8% in 2026. Nvidia's own CEO, Jensen Huang, has publicly said the company now has essentially zero market share left in China and has argued that US export policy has largely backfired. Huawei's flagship Ascend chip line has moved fast. The Ascend 910C reportedly delivers around 60% of the inference performance of an Nvidia H100 chip, according to analysis from the Center for Strategic and International Studies. Good enough that Chinese AI labs, increasingly rationed on Nvidia parts, are shifting real workloads onto it. Huawei's newer Ascend 950PR chip, launched in 2026, is reported to hit 1.56 petaflops of low-precision compute using Huawei's own in-house memory standard, built specifically to avoid dependence on packaging technology it's been cut off from. Huawei is reportedly aiming to roughly double Ascend chip production in 2026, with its full chip lineup expected to reach as many as 1.6 million units. None of this means China has caught up to America's best chips. It hasn't, and independent analysts are clear that Ascend chips still lag Nvidia's most advanced training hardware. Huawei is also fighting real constraints of its own. It remains cut off from TSMC's most advanced manufacturing processes, forcing its domestic foundry partner, SMIC, to produce Ascend chips on older, less efficient technology. And a widely reported sanctions evasion scheme that funneled roughly 2.9 million TSMC-made chip dies to Huawei through a shell company resulted in a $1 billion fine for TSMC once U.S. authorities uncovered it. But scarcity has a way of forcing efficiency. Barclays estimates that by 2026, roughly 70% of global AI compute demand will come from running already trained models, called inference, rather than training new ones from scratch. And inference is exactly where China's homegrown chips are now competitive enough to matter. Chinese chip designer Cambricon has reportedly tripled its own production targets toward roughly 500,000 accelerators, and Chinese labs, including Alibaba and ByteDance, increasingly rationed on Nvidia parts, are shifting real procurement toward domestic silicon rather than waiting for export rules to loosen. Export controls were built to stop China from training the next great model. They're proving far less effective at stopping China from running the models it already has. On hardware, it now builds itself. Here's the problem, though. Even a homegrown chip still has to play by America's export rules. Or so everyone assumed. Because buried inside US law was a hole big enough to move $1 trillion of restricted compute through, and Chinese companies found it a full year before anyone in Washington noticed. What Congress discovered about that loophole and how fast lawmakers scrambled to shut it down is the reason this entire list ends exactly where it does. Stay until the end, because number one is the moment Washington admitted its own strategy had a hole in it the whole time. Number one, Washington just admitted the chip ban has a loophole the size of the internet. Here's where this stops being a story about hardware and starts being a story about a law that didn't exist 12 months ago because Chinese companies found a hole nobody had thought to close. Export controls were built around a simple idea. If a chip physically leaves the United States and lands in China, that's an export, and it's illegal without a license. But nobody wrote a rule for what happens when the chip never leaves the US at all. When a Chinese company simply rents access to it over the internet through a data center sitting in a third country. According to reporting compiled by the trade advisory firm Introl, Chinese firms did exactly that. One Chinese tech company reportedly rented 2,300 restricted Nvidia Blackwell chips through a data center in Indonesia. Tencent reportedly secured contracts worth $1.2 billion for access to 15,000 Blackwell processors through a Japanese cloud provider. None of it technically violated the letter of the law because renting cloud compute had never been legally classified as an export. Congress noticed on January 12, 2026, the U.S. House of Representatives passed the Remote Access Security Act by a lopsided 369-22 vote. A bill that, for the first time, would treat remote access to controlled American technology through cloud computing as a form of export subject to the same licensing rules as physically shipping a chip overseas. The bill's sponsor, Representative Michael Lawler of New York, built it specifically to close what House China Committee members called a loophole letting foreign adversaries reach controlled AI chips remotely through cloud services without ever needing to smuggle a single physical chip across a border. Lawmakers have separately been weighing the GAIN AI Act, which would require chip makers to offer American buyers first right of refusal before any advanced AI chip is sold abroad at all. Read the logic in that legislation carefully, because it tells you exactly how seriously Washington now takes this. Cooling systems, power infrastructure, cloud rental agreements, and data center design are now being treated as strategically equivalent to the chip itself. It no longer matters whether the silicon crosses a border if the compute it provides can be reached from anywhere on Earth through an internet connection. That's an extraordinary admission. The country that invented the modern chip export control regime is now rewriting it because a rental agreement in Jakarta or Tokyo was enough to root around it. Free, downloadable Chinese models running on domestically built chips, executing tasks in Chinese-built robots, powered by a Chinese grid built to run hot for a decade. Each piece reinforces the others. A country that can't buy the world's best chip is instead trying to make the chip matter less, by controlling everything a chip is used for once it's already running. Putting it together. Go back to that number from the opening. A model trained for a fraction of what American labs were reportedly spending, matching their performance almost overnight, and $1 trillion in market value gone in a matter of days. That wasn't an isolated shock. It was the visible tip of a system that had already been building for years, across 5 industries that don't operate in isolation from each other. The same open-source models flooding developer platforms in Africa, Southeast Asia, and Latin America are being fine-tuned to run inside the humanoid robots now rolling off assembly lines in Shenzhen and Hangzhou. The same power grid built to run a decade ahead of demand is the one now feeding a $295 billion national computing build-out designed around domestic chips. The same Ascend chips racing to replace Nvidia inside China are proving just capable enough for the inference workloads that will make up most of global AI demand within a couple of years. And the same legal gray zone that let Chinese firms rent restricted compute through Jakarta and Tokyo data centers is the exact loophole forcing Congress to rewrite export law in real time. None of this happened by accident. It's the result of a government treating AI infrastructure, models, robots, power, chips, and the cloud rental market connecting them all as a strategic asset worth dominating from every angle at once, the same way it once approached shipping, steel, and solar power. The United States isn't rewriting its export laws because a chatbot is dangerous. It's rewriting them because, for the first time since the modern AI race began, the country that used to assume it held every card just discovered how many ways there are to play the hand anyway. Drop a comment. Which of these 5 surprised you the most? The free model already running on your phone, or the chip loophole Congress only closed this year? Because the AI race was never just about who builds the smartest model, it's about who controls everything that model needs to actually work.